What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Season 3 has not been doing that great, as you probably know by now. Unfortunately, there's a lot of criticism, and a lot of people are very unhappy with the seasonal mechanic. So, unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it now. They don't have enough time to really make changes besides buffing the pet a little bit. Pretty much everything there is to do hasn't really changed much since Season 2. It's unfortunately, I think it is a complete and utter under-deliver. I think that's pretty much the best way to put it. There was a lot of expectations and a lot of hype for Season 3. They did not hit those. Unfortunately, it is what it is. But there's not enough time to change it. And there's no point in just shitting on it and making just saying it's bad, D4 bad. So what I wanted to do was attempt to do a what the construct should have been. I made a list and made pretty much just redesigned how the construct works to make it affect more of the player's abilities instead of just dealing damage out itself, which in my opinion is just boring. It's just a basic ass number. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't change any builds. It doesn't change any playstyle, and I hate that. I think that is not good for a seasonal mechanic, and I think it needs to be worked on. All right, so I'm going to go over my rules for how the construct should work, just as a basic general understanding. When it's going through all these different abilities, you'll understand more. So first off, I don't want it to be a pet, and I don't want it to follow you. Well, technically it follows, but I don't want it a pet where it runs around its own and attacks on its own. I want it to be stationary to the player. As you move, it follows you in line. Same distance from you. It doesn't really move on its own. I think the AI for minions and pets in D4 are not the greatest. I've played Minion Necro quite a bit. I've played Mendelm Necro, and they don't feel great. There's a lot of times where you'll keep moving on, and 4 of your mages will sit back into the room previously and attack one small mob in the middle of the corner. And then a lot of the times, just getting them to engage and attack things don't really work out how you want. They don't attack the same targets. It's very clunky, and it feels bad sometimes. So I want it to be stationary, and it does things based off of what you do, not on its own. Second part, attacks from this construct will count as your casts. So for example, any attacks it makes will trigger lucky hits. It'll apply any effects from skill tree passives. It'll apply any effects from legendary aspects on gear, and it'll apply any effects from the Paragon board. This is really important as I go into it. You'll understand more as I go. It'll be casting skills for you and mimicking your skills. So I think it'll be really good if those are also able to trigger different effects like Lucky Hit. I have a cat in here. All right, let's get into the effects. Also, just so you guys understand, I am not a developer. When it comes to damage numbers and spreadsheets and what's too strong, what's not that strong, and what needs a little bit of balancing, I don't know any of this stuff. It would need to be tested. Some things I may put in here are ridiculously overpowered and don't compare with the other choices. That may happen, but, I try my best to come up with an idea that I think is on the original side and also will really change gameplay, which is my biggest thing. Is that's what I look for in a seasonal mechanic, is what's going to make me play different from the last season, not just numbers. So, first thing. Oh, also, sorry, one more thing to add. I look at this like a skill tree path. You get 3 choices in each skill tree. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. Now that all that's out of the way, let's get into it. When you cast an ability, your construct will mimic it for 30% of the damage. Next choice, every 5 abilities you cast, your construct will mimic for 90% of the damage. And the last choice in this tree, every 10 abilities you cast, your construct will mimic it for 130% of the damage. I wanted to get this set up and give you choices on making it kind of similar to like how Barb works when you're swapping weapons. You want to get that overpower on your 10th swap or things like that worked with different aspects. I wanted that to be a feeling with this choice, meaning that if you want to pay attention to how many abilities you cast and you want to get your ultimate cast a second time every single 10 abilities, you can with extra damage. So this will work from some ultimates. Other ultimates it won't work as well. So things like cooldowns like, Bone Storm won't be as strong with this because you're already casting a Bone Storm, meaning another one cast isn't going to amplify things or change things very much. So that one really won't matter. But Blood Wave, say you want to cast a Blood Wave and then it's your 10th cast and it will mimic that and also cast a Blood Wave at targets. That could get really ridiculously strong when you have 130% damage, and say you also run aspects where it shoots out 3 Blood Waves, and then also it will make it a darkness skill and will leave desecrated ground everywhere. And I think that's really exciting. On top of that, say you take the one where it casts an ability, every single ability you cast it will mimic it for 30% of the damage. Say you're going something like a Lucky Hit build. that also has the possibilities of triggering Lucky Hit every single cast. So even though you're not getting it for the damage, maybe you're trying to get it for the effects that come with it. So that's my thought process behind those choices. So let's jump into the next one. You'll also notice that I really liked revolving these around ultimate abilities because some of them feel very, 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 very strong. Others feel kind of on the weak side. So I think using some of this, it might be able to buff some of the ultimates in a way that maybe make you play a little bit differently. Once again, just more options, more choices, more build diversity. When you cast your ultimate, every ability your construct mimics will increase its duration by 1 second up to 10 seconds. I'll go into more detail on that when I read all of them. When you cast your ultimate, your construct will store all of the damage you deal during the duration. The next time you cast your ultimate, your construct will erupt, dealing 50% of the damage stored. If no duration, it'll do this for 10 seconds. When you cast your ultimate, your construct will deal dot damage for 40% of the damage you deal to each enemy. So, I'll break those down a little bit and explain them. When casting different ultimates, obviously some of them have durations, others just are Blood Wave. I'm going to use Necro a lot for examples because that's been my main for most seasons. Blood Wave is just cast it out, done, no duration, anything. So if there is no duration, for example, for the second one where it stores damage, for 10 seconds after casting, you'll be able to store damage similar if there was a duration. And then for Bone Storm, which is another example, for the first one, it'll increase Bone Storm's duration up to 10 seconds. So similar to the one skill where you consume corpses and it will actually increase the duration of your Bone Storm. Something similar to that. Once again, this gives you a bunch of different choices. And to finish it off with the third one, a good example would be for Barbarian, with the aspect where you apply 30% of your damage as a bleed. It'll work the same exact way depending on what class you are. Necro will apply shadow damage, Sorcerer will apply fire damage, and then Barbarian will apply bleed. Rogue can apply poison, things like that. So that's how that'll work. It'll automatically apply that as a dot, which can help out with a lot of different builds. I think it's pretty good. For the next skill tree, I wanted to make this one more of like a buff. Kind of similar to the Blood Powers where we had, I believe it was called Ravenous, which increased your attack speed. I love that, and it feels really shitty without that. The attack speed really opened up a lot of builds. That's what made Ball Lightning so ridiculously strong, is just being able to spam those out super fast. So I wanted to add a couple different things where it can make some builds work a little bit better than they currently do, and make some really powerful options that you have to choose between. Every basic skill you cast in succession increases your attack speed by 10% up to 50% for 7 seconds. Attacking with a basic refreshes this 7 seconds every time. Pretty straightforward. Every core skill you cast in succession decreases the resource cost by 15% up to 60% for 5 seconds. Attacking with a core skill refreshes the time. Also pretty broken. Every skill you cast that is a non-basic or a core skill reduces your cooldowns by 1 second. Obviously, these are all ridiculously strong. Actually, I think probably nerfing the numbers back would probably be a good idea. But I also, everything in this entire list, I consider as like the absolute max. So maybe you could start out a little bit lower in those percentages, maybe where you get up to like 20% attack speed or core skill reduction to like 15, 20%, like things like that. So every skill you cast that's a non-basic or core skill reduces your cooldowns by 1 second. I like that one because that is more class specific. So some classes don't really get to use a lot of other skills besides core skills. So we'll use the Sorcerer, for example. Firewall, Lightning Ball. All of these things are not one of those skills. So you're able to cast them and spam them over and over again. When it comes to another class, like say for example, like Necro, there's some abilities you can spam, like Corpse Explosion. But for the most part, you're not spamming Bone Spirit or Bone Prison or Corpse Tendrils. You're not able to spam those as much. So unless it's specifically a Corpse Explosion build, you're not really going to be using that one because it doesn't help you as much as other builds could. Sorcerer, as I said, would be very strong. Firewall build, non-stop spamming it. Your ultimate would be up. Your ultimate would be up non-stop. Your defensives would be up non-stop. It would be just ridiculously strong. For the next one. This one is probably the biggest impact when it comes to damage. I think this might get a little on the broken side. Probably would need to be scaled back in these numbers, but once again, we're here to have fun, so screw it. Why does it matter? All right. Your critical strikes increase your movement speed and crit damage multiplicatively by 2% every crit up to 30% for 5 seconds. Every time you crit, it refreshes the time. Okay. Your dots are able to crit. Every dot tick increases your crit chance by 0.5% up to 25% for 5 seconds. And then applying a dot refreshes that time as well. That one would scale super, super quick. You'd be able to finish it almost in like 5 seconds, get up to 25% crit chance, which would be great, especially on Shadow Necro. And a critting corpse explosion. Okay. When you crowd control an enemy, you gain 10 primary resource. When you spend a resource, increase the damage of the ability by 0.3% multiplicative damage per resource used. I'm going to change that to 0.03. That would probably be a little too broken. Yeah, I just pictured that third one being used with Bone Spirit and just getting the biggest explosion that ever was. And just, well, I mean, it probably wouldn't hit as hard as Hodabar, but still, that's fine. Second one, having your dots able to crit, especially when you're applying 5, 6 different dots as like Shadow Necro or a bunch of different burns as a Sork. I could see how that could get a little bit broken quickly, and I love it. First one, straightforward crit damage. Bone Spear Necro, Lightning Sorcerer. Just, oh god. And you'd be fast as fuck, boy. Alright, on to the next one. Alright, this one's a little more relaxed, which I think is probably a good thing. Your construct will cast a chosen core skill for free every 6 seconds. These casts will count as your casts. So same as everything else, it will apply any kind of effects. As I said, this one's a little bit more on the basic side, but I kind of like how this one works. Just it was like a small little thing, not as ridiculous as some of the last ones. Your construct will cast a free chosen Mastery, Macabre, Weapon Mastery, Wrath, or Trap skill every 10 seconds. Could be useful for a lot of different builds. This one I'm not sure 100% how it would work with every single skill. So for example, a Macabre skill, I'm not sure how they would work with Bone Spirit. I think it would depend on how much essence you have upon that cast. Maybe it would kind of be treated like everything would be cast for free, obviously, but maybe it would be treated how Blood Arson's Curious works, where it just sends out a Bone Spirit. Not sure, but that'd be something that I'd have to be worked out with each skill. And then the last one, your construct will cast a free chosen ultimate skill for you every 45 seconds. With all the ultimate synergy between some of the other skills, I like this one a lot, where if you're not able to get your ultimate at a super low cooldown, this will just throw in a couple of extras, maybe keeping almost permanent uptime on things like Bone Storm, or the one Druid one where it turns you into a monster bear, makes you ridiculously strong. Things like that I think could make for a lot of fun. So what would be choices without a little bit of survivability? We had to add in some, right? I mean, people are dying like crazy. With all this extra damage, not only would you be able to just stack aspects on your chest, head, and pants because you already have so much damage everywhere else, you can go defensive. Let's add some more defensives. Also, another thing to keep in mind is I had Abattoir of Zir in mind when it came to a lot of these. Although it wasn't the perfect thing, it was at least some endgame, which you had to min-max to grind up to higher levels. I like that, and I want more of that in the future. I have a couple ideas for a new video after this, but let's stick to this. When your dots tick, you gain 0.3% Fortify of your max HP. You gain 40% of your life as a barrier for 5 seconds. That can only happen every 60 seconds. Your dot ticks will reduce that cooldown by 1 second. I'll have to explain this one because even reading it, I don't think I wrote it down the best. So, when your dots tick, you gain Fortify of your max HP. Perfect. Shadow Necro, constantly fortified. Then, you can gain a barrier for 40% of your life for 5 seconds. But that goes on a 60-second cooldown. As your dots tick, it'll reduce that cooldown on how much it can go off. Some builds, Fire Sork and Shadow Necro, specifically because I play both those so I know, can apply a ton of different shadow damage effects and a ton of different burn effects from multiple different sources. That 60-second cooldown can get pulled down real fast to a 10 second cooldown, I imagine. This also has a possibility, say for example Druid, which has a lot of trouble getting barrier, and Barbarian has a lot of trouble getting barrier, maybe could implement a way to get barrier using this by getting bleeds or poison. I think it could create a little bit of build changes when it comes to Rabies, which was buffed, and a couple different poison effects with Druid. And now that we got our Rend unique as Barbarian, maybe be able to add something like that. So, last one. Oh, sorry. Middle one. When you use a cooldown, you gain 2% all resistances up to 30% for 10 seconds. As you use the cooldown, it will refresh that 10 seconds. At max stacks, when you cast your ultimate, you gain 5% max resist to all elements. So this goes in with where you're capped at 70% for resistances. Once this is at max stacks, you have 30%. You cast your ultimate, it will give you a little bit extra max resistances, which I like, because they've even said it themselves, any bit of max resist you can get after the 70% cap is going to be ridiculous for survivability. And this kind of has a weird condition where you not only have to be at max, but then you have to cast your ultimate. Once again, there's a lot of synergy with the ultimates where this could be almost permanent uptime. But once again, more survivability, more opportunities to change up your build a little bit and get your timing right. And the last one, you gain 4% lifesteal. When you're at max life, overhealing will grant you 1% of your armor per 10% of your max life you overheal. Up to 30% armor for 10 seconds. Kind of adding like disobedience with, I forgot what aspect it is. Not necessarily temerity because you're not getting a barrier. But you need to overheal a specific amount to gain the effect. Also, there's only, I believe, one other thing in Diablo 4 that gives lifesteal, and that is the Helm Visage. Not Visage. Yes, and Dariel's Visage, which gives lifesteal, which doesn't work for a lot of builds because it's poison-based. I think lifesteal will be kind of broken, depending on the build, but the survivability of this sounds like it could be a lot of fun for, once again, Necro, where you're able to take a bunch of damage, pop Blood Mist, deal a bunch of damage, gain a bunch of lifesteal from that while you're invulnerable, and then immediately start stacking your armor back up. I feel like it'd be a really ridiculous survivability mechanic. Same thing with Sork. You're about to die, get some barriers up and going, maybe pop like Deep Freeze or something. Maybe this could be used for Deep Freeze to finally be good. Bring all your life back up while dealing damage, gain some more armor. I like it. I think it changes a lot of build diversity once again. And I'm curious how that would mix with things. So one thing I think they had a really good idea about, but they kind of dropped the ball, was adding the unique tuning stones for your construct. The 4 rank stall skills is excellent. Love it. It's just like the Shaco, however the hell you want to pronounce it. I like that one. The other one, 150% effectiveness, kind of sucks when the construct doesn't really do damage. So even when it gives a buff to all of its damage, it doesn't really do anything. They really dropped the ball on those. I think they should have honestly had 2 to 3 more that were broken and changed your builds. But I like the attempt, the idea that you have to farm something later on once it's maxed out, and it's like an endgame farm for your construct. So I created something similar. What I came up with is, once again, going more towards the numbers, but I feel like it could really change some of the builds. So one of them, I specifically wanted to go towards a channel abilities. With the buffed Druid, I really want to play a Lightning Storm Druid. And also, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to make an Incinerate build for Sorcerer this season. I don't think it's going to be the strongest build, but I'm going to damn well make it. And it's going to kill Duriel a bunch, and I'm going to kill Lilith with it. So we'll see. Maybe I'll make a video about that later on down the line when I'm finished and I'm maxed out. When your construct casts a core skill, the damage is increased by 50%. It doesn't sound that strong at first, but when paired with, say for example, the first one, it'll mimic every single skill. Now your Bone Spear Necro, casting pretty much 2 Bone Spears every shot. Yeah, that'd be fucking stupid. All right, next one. Let me make sure. Good, okay. All right, next one. This is my favorite. When your construct mimics a channel ability, both of your damage, for yours and the channel, is increased by 10% per second up to 100%. Right now, the game is not designed for channeling. It is putting you at a disadvantage in every scenario, especially this season. You gotta dodge traps, shit constantly popping up, death effects. There's so many things where standing still is bad. Not to mention you're trying to run through a dungeon. It's pointless. Make it more beneficial. I was honestly considering increasing this by 20% per second up to 10%. You know what? This is all theory crafting. I do whatever the hell I want. 20% per second up to 100%. I want channeling skills to be stronger. They need buffs, all of them. besides probably Decompose. But that just needs to be fixed. So Lucky Hit procs effectively and Hued Flesh procs effectively, and all those. Right now, that doesn't matter whatsoever. Incinerate and Lightning Storm, Whirlwind is pretty okay. But those two really need buffs. So I think this would be a good way to, especially mixed with everything else, to kind of bring those up to par a little bit more for some other builds. And the last one, once again, got to go ultimate skill, because why not make perfect synergy with everything else? When your construct casts an ultimate skill, it increases your cooldown reduction by 20%, movement speed by 20%, damage by 20%, and critical strike chance by 20% for the duration, or if there is no duration, Blood Wave for 10 seconds. Even put Blood Wave as an example in there. This is just pretty much, if neither of these work well with your build, so for example, the core skill wouldn't work well, or the channeling one wouldn't work well, say so Firewall would be a good example, this would just give you pretty much all around benefits. I like to think of this as like this paired with your dots are able to crit. Where do I got that? Right up here. With a Firewall build, popping your ultimate, give you a ton of extra damage. Your dots are now able to crit, boosting all of your dot damage. Would really just make a ridiculous build. Also, Corpse Explosion would be a lot of fun, because you'd gain movement speed, the extra damage, and the critical strike chance while your dots are critting. Yeah. You know, what's kind of funny is I thought of all of these and went through them, but I actually haven't went through and built what I would build depending on a skill myself. Like if I were to go like Corpse Explosion, which ones would I take? Maybe that's something I'll do in another video, just going through and seeing if this is actually viable. I'm sure it's strong. But yeah, that's all of them. I think something like this, even though it probably doesn't have as much going into it, it's, you know, only 7 different lists of 3 different abilities, so a 7-path skill tree. I think it brings more value than the current construct does in Season 3. They're boring. They don't help any builds. They don't do anything for us. I just want something different. So that's all I got. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, rewatch the video if you want. Relook at everything. Think of some builds yourself. Let me know what you guys think. If you think this is dumb, ridiculous, and doesn't really make sense, and it's a bad idea for construct, and I'm on the side where maybe it doesn't affect build as much as I want it to, but at the same time thinking about specific builds and actually going through the skill trees and picking out which ones would benefit each other and would synergize well, I think it could be a lot of fun. But let me know what you guys think. Although it's unfortunate they won't be able to change this season, construct is what it is. They may be able to buff damage, but let's be honest, that's not really going to change any playstyle. I think Season 3 is most likely going to be a bust. I don't think really much is going to be able to change. Well, at least they're not going to be able to change anything in time for it to be a good season. All we can do is look forward to Season 4. Hopefully this blows up and you guys enjoy this, and maybe Blizzard would take some examples, because I think this would be a lot of fun, being able to spam cast some of these abilities and make your ultimate this ridiculous ability that just changes everything for the next 15 seconds and makes your characters absolutely busted. I think that would be a lot of fun. So, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.